Okay, today I have another ultimate question for you. Of course, we all know the ultimate question is, do you validate? That's the ultimate question. Here's another ultimate question, because when you answer this one, you really figure out what's important for you in life. And the question is, what are you willing to die for? Now, where this comes from is watching movies, because I like action adventure. Usually the hero will get caught by the villains, and they tie him up or something. It's a James Bond movie, and James Bond gets caught, and he's getting beat up or something, and they're saying, give us the code, and he won't talk. He won't give him the code. And I'm thinking, boy, if that was happening to me, I'd probably be going 7543321. That's the code. Please stop doing that. But it begged the question, what would somebody ask me that my life was more, or basically that question, or the answer to that question, was more important than my life? And it's not that I want to get morbid on you and say, oh my gosh, I'd die for this, I'd die for that. But what I discovered myself when I asked myself that question, what would I be willing to die for? I started to identify things to me that were more important than me. And I know we all have those. And again, it's a little bit delving into the philosophical about it, but when I started to identify them, two things happen. Again, we're talking about authenticity here. Am I going to be the authentic person standing on the stage talking to the audience? I discovered things about myself that allowed me to be more authentic to the audience because I knew them about myself. I may never communicate them to the audience, but I knew them about myself. So therefore, at a higher level of self-awareness, a higher level of self-certainty when I stood in front of an audience. But I also identified things that were great speech topics that I could share with the audience. Maybe it's not an entire speech, but it's a point you want to make in a speech. It accents something that you're trying to get the audience to understand and to duplicate. So it's a fantastic question, I found, to sort of open up that door inside our mind and dig around and figure out who we really are, what we stand for. What are you willing to die for? Now, in my seminars, when I do this, one of the things I ask, I said, how many people have kids? And all the hands go up. I said, who would die for their kids if it came down between you and your children? And all the hands go up. I go, yeah, except if you have teenagers, right? Then it's sort of a question at that point. But I'm not trying to get morbid and say, I want you to die for your children. But the question is, every parent I've ever known, there was never even a question in their mind that if it was between them and their child, they give up their life for their child. Well, that represents a value. That represents a principle of living. What's the principle of living that causes you to be willing to make that decision? That's what I want you to look at. So I put myself in a whole series of situations, and it's like if I gave somebody a computer code and they pushed a button and they killed 30 million people, but I got to live. Would I do that? I go, probably not. I figure that 30 million lives are worth more than mine. Now, if it's 29 million, it'd probably be a question, but 30 million, it's worth more than my life on that. So I ran myself through a bunch of scenarios, and I started to identify really what was important to me and where my values stood. And it's also an interesting concept too, to contemplate, what are you willing to die for? At any rate, I hope you find this interesting. It's a great question to contemplate. I hope it brings some authenticity to you and to your speeches.